talked about a little bit about revival. Again, I don't talk to her when it comes to this stuff. We usually find out what we're talking about when it's time for church. But I want to talk to you for a few minutes on the secrets of revival. You know, there's things we have to do. There's things that must be done. And it's called the secrets of revival. And again, my wife said this morning, revival is not for them. Revival is for this place, for the saints of God. If you look in 2 Kings 18, it says, "Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elihu, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places and break the images, and cut down the groves, and break in the pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made, for unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it. And he called it Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judea, nor any that were before him. For he clave to the Lord and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments which the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him, and he prospered whatsoever he went forth, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and served him not." If you look at Hezekiah's, his father was a cruel, suspicious weakling who did evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, if you look at a lot of these kings through in 2 Kings and in all these, most of them did evil in the sight of the Lord. There was just a few that didn't. Ahaz, Hezekiah's father, led Israel into idolatry and even burnt alive his own child to the king or the god Moloch. So when Hezekiah, you look at Hezekiah, it's amazing that the way he came out, the way he turned out. And if you continue to read on Hezekiah, it could have been that his mother, the daughter of Zechariah, helped him, which I'm sure she had a lot to do with his walk with God. But there was some others in that day that had influence on Hezekiah. Micah was prophesying, and Nahum was coming up. Isaiah was around then, and some believe that Isaiah was Hezekiah's tutor when it come to the things of God and in the influence of God. So you can look at that and say, well, he had some good help, and he did. So revival in Judah started in the heart of Hezekiah because he became stirred by the preaching of those that was his tutor and those that was around him. He was stirred by the preaching that he committed his life and reigned to the purpose of national revival. If you look at Hezekiah's life, he did some things that he did as a king. He saw the need for a tunnel to be built to protect their water supply in case of an enemy attack. He directed a rush job on that tunnel. Now listen to this, which was 1,708 feet long through solid limestone. Now they didn't have caterpillars. They didn't have any kind of equipment like we have today. They all did it by hand, by picks, and they got together and did this 708 feet long through solid limestone. And he diverted the drinking water from a spring outside of the city you know the cities had walls, and they diverted it underneath the walls to a cistern safely inside the city. He loved the arts. He loved music. He loved literature. And reinstating regular temple worship, he gave the importance to choirs and instrumentals. And it says in Proverbs 25:1, Hezekiah's men collected Solomon's proverbs, showing that he loved the literary renaissance. So Hezekiah was a man of all kinds of wide interests. But in all these, Hezekiah, he was having a religious crisis. Does that sound familiar? And I said at the beginning, his father Ahaz was a cruel, superstitious weakling who did evil in the sight of God. He also encouraged people to follow paganism. So now, on top of the other things, Hezekiah was having to try to reverse the trend of his father towards idolatry. And believe it or not, he was having success in all his works. So as the king, he had power and influences to bring revival. But it was not because he was king that brought revival, which did help. But it was from his strong convictions and faith in God. It was because of his upbringing. And so Hezekiah's heart was in tune with his God. And he was determined to bring revival no matter what it took. He was going to bring revival to Judah. And so with everything going on when he became king, it would have, if you look at it, it would have been much easier for the king at this time just to not rock the boat. Because it seems the people were not raising any, listen to this, they weren't raising any objections to their way of life right at the moment. They were enjoying themselves. Everything was going smooth. They didn't care. The religion that they were having was fine with them. They didn't care about it. Ahaz, his father, closed the temple. And they cooperated in desecration of the temple with a Syrian altar. And rearranged a lot of the furnishings so they could bring in their foreign gods that they were worshiping. I just want to put this in, church. We need to be careful that we don't get comfortable in the church to where we come to church and go home. You see, and that the things of this world don't become a god to us and push the things of God out. Should I repeat that? We need to be careful that we don't get comfortable in just coming to church and going home, and that the things of this world don't become to us a god, and that it pushes the things of God out. Come on. It's happening in the church world today. You see, Hezekiah could have all kinds of excuses to just sit back, but he believed that they needed to return. That they needed to return to the worship of the Almighty God. And he didn't care if he was the only one. He was going to do it. Are you listening, church? We need to be careful. So Hezekiah, he began removing idolatry. And it wasn't easy because the temple, it was completely closed. Ahaz had done away with anything church, it's coming. You look at this situation and put it up against today's situation, and it's funny how this all goes together. There was heathen practices, false gods, false priests, false rituals everywhere in the country. And the worship had been, of all this heathen worship, had been so entrenched for so long that when Hezekiah reinstituted the worship of Jehovah, it looked strange to the younger Hebrews that were there. Oh, my. It went so long that the younger generation had no idea what was going on. Why? Because they allowed idolatry to overcome, and idolatry began to get in the church. And the worship of idols became in the church itself. And so the younger generation didn't know any different. That's what we need to be careful about today. Sacrifices. The bronze servant. You see, he destroyed all the idols and the false gods. And if you go to 2 Kings 18:4, he removed the pagan shrines, smashed the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah pole. He broke up the bronze serpent that Moses had made way back because the people of Israel had been offering sacrifices to it. It talks about the bronze serpent was called Nehushtan. And this happened 700 years earlier. You see, Nehushtan means a piece of brass. You remember the story. He made the brass serpent, and the children of Israel, they looked upon it and they were healed at one time. 700 years earlier. And they were still worshiping it. But Hezekiah broke that brazen serpent in half, and with a simple statement, he said this: it's a piece of brass. It's not God. You don't worship a piece of brass. This is idolatry. The trouble was that men had been worshiping something God had used rather than worshiping the God himself. Oh, my. We could get into something there. We have idolatry today because we worship things something that God made and not the God himself. I'll say it again. When we worship or exalt anything else but the one true God, it becomes an idol. An idol that must be torn down. Listen to this. An idol that must be torn down before victory can become ours. You see, church, we need to take a serious inventory of our lives to see if there's some idols in our lives. Anything that takes precedence over our God is an idol. What are you saying, preacher? Your job, your sports, video games, TV. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble. iPhones, YouTube, Facebook. There is probably a whole mess of other things. Anything that we spend more time than spending to God is an idol. And it will kill revival. Hezekiah knew that, and he destroyed all the idols before true worship could happen. If we want to see revival in this church and city, we need to start looking at our own hearts. Start looking at our own heart, not each other's hearts. That's between them and God. We need to get our own hearts straightened out. You see, Hezekiah became consumed with the idea of revival until it became a part of him. That's all he thought about. We must become consumed with revival. Because when we do, our walk with God will change. Our worship will change. God will become number one. This place here will become important. Our prayer will change. I saw something this morning. For those of you that know Brother Billy Cole, he said this: revival is when people are lining up at the church door for prayer meeting. Ouch. Prayer will change things. And revival is when people are lining up at the church door for prayer meeting. Another thing that Hezekiah did was open the doors of the temple that his father had closed. You see, we can't change the problems of the city of Arthur without the spiritual power of the church. But if the church has the world in the church, we're not going to change the world. That's for me, the book of Froese. If we got the church in, if we got the world in the church, how can we change? Oh my. This church is the only hope of salvation and spiritual victory. And if we neglect the church with idolatry, we steal our love from the one true God. You see, another thing that Hezekiah did, he restored the ministry. Because he knew that he could not bring revival to a nation by himself. And although revival starts in the heart of one man, he can't do it alone. My wife talked about it this morning. I want revival in this place here. But I need every church member, every man, woman, boy, and girl. We won't always agree. Listen to me. We're not always going to agree on things. But you see, that's okay. We're human. But we as a church have to join hands and agree together in one mind and one accord. And when we do this, it's been said twice now, this place will explode with revival. But Hezekiah wasn't done. The next thing he did, listen to this one, he cleansed the filthiness from the temple. You see, it was full of rubbish. So the priest had to go in and clean out the filthiness. We have to, as a church, we're going to have to, if we're going to have revival, we got to clean the filthy habits, the ideas, the thoughts, the attitudes out of our lives, our home, and our church before revival will fall in this place. And if we, oh my. I want to see revival. The last thing he did was to restore the sacrifices. You see, at this time of this story, sacrifices were selected from the very best of the flock. There is an element that comes with a sacrifice that will not come any other way. It's when a man or a woman gives to God of his substance, the very best of his or herself. It affects a change of character in him. It produces qualities of godliness in his soul. In order to be like Jesus, one must sacrifice of himself. Luke 9:23 says, and he said unto them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. The only way you're going to keep out the worldly influences, listen to me, the only way you're going to keep out the worldly influences in your life is to make the altar a regular place every day. You have to find an altar. This last week, I was trying to think, and nobody likes to fast. But I just felt like I needed to fast. And so last Tuesday, let's stand. Last Tuesday, I decided to fast. And I might bring this sometime in the future. I was listening to more like a podcast or an interview that one of our pastors was doing with an evangelist, Brother Herring. And he's got a book coming out that said, Fast Forward. And I decided to fast 2 days without food, just water. I did have, nobody likes unsweet tea. Has nothing in it. All zeros on the thing. Just tea bags have been in it, I guess. And so I drank water and unsweet tea, and I had nothing to eat. And I work at a school, and I have to clean the kitchen, and I see food all day long. This day they had a double cheeseburger made for me. Oh my. You got pickles and mustard and ketchup and all that stuff. And they handed that to me, and I'm thinking, oh God, but I put it in my refrigerator at work. And I went 2 days without food. And I listened to Brother Herring talk. Now I want you to listen to this. He said, what fasting does, he said it pulls out the impurities. In other words, you see some people that fast, they're angry. And I went through the day guarding myself because I was really hungry, and then you do this, things get onto you worse than they do any other time, and things were just exploding. I mean, stuff was happening. I was trying not to get hangry, but he says when you fast, and here's what happens: you fast and you see yourself getting angry and things start. That's what the problem with you is. So in other words, fasting brings out the stuff that God is wanting you to get rid of. And so I fasted those 2 days, and I come off the fast, and I'm thinking, well, I don't see nothing. What was this all about? But all of a sudden, right before I went home, something happened. I didn't get upset verbally or show anything, but in my mind I'm thinking, this is so aggravating. I'm just done with it. And all this stuff started coming out. I'm beginning to think, my Lord, that stuff we got to get out. That stuff in our life, we got to get out. All the stuff that happens even at a church, the talk, all this stuff. God's saying, if you want revival, something to happen in your church, get those things out. Get those idols out, those things that are more important than me. You got to get rid of them. And he said, then I will give you revival. Things will happen that you've never seen before. When you get rid of the idols and you find your closet and you find your prayer time, things will begin to happen. Because all that stuff, you've given it to God, and now it's just you and Him. The creator of the universe, He's sitting down and He's talking to you. And my, how things can begin to change. But until we get rid of the idols and get rid of those things that's in our life that shouldn't be there, we're going to struggle with revival. We're going to struggle with growth. So I'm here to tell you today, church, search your heart. Let God search. It says in Psalms, search me, O God, know my thoughts. See if there's anything in here, God, that's not supposed to be there. And change me, cleanse me. Where are you today, church? Is there idols in your life? Let me just say, if it's hard for you to come to church, you better check the idols. If it's hard for you to come and pray, there's something in your life that's more important to you than the God of the universe. But here's the great thing. You're in the right place to get rid of all that stuff. So as they begin to sing, I invite you to come. And let's find a place. And let's, in all sincerity, God, search me. God, get those idols, those things that are more important to you, more important than you, get them out.